Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to my YouTube channel Step to Steps, in which I, a final year medical student, will take you along on my journey while giving my steps. So basically, the topic for today's video is a revision of the respiratory module's anatomy. It's a general review which we'll do with the help of first aid and with the help of our Snell's clinical anatomy. Okay, so let's start with the first topic, which is the respiratory tree. Basically, the respiratory tree is a term which is used to describe the branching system of the airways in the lung through which air travels to the alveoli from the external environment and the gas exchange occurs. The respiratory tree consists of two zones, particularly the conducting zone and the respiratory zone, both of which act together to give the body optimal oxygen. So let's talk about the conducting zone. The conducting zone is basically all of the parts of the respiratory system which transport air to the lung. Acha, the most important thing to remember is that there is no gas exchange which occurs here. While the respiratory zone, if we talk about that, this is the main site for the respiratory gas exchange. That is, oxygen and CO2 is exchanged from the tissues. If we talk about the histological characteristics of both, the main difference is that the conducting zone is lined by mucous membrane and cilia, which are basically protective agents to protect the body against foreign particle inhalation. And in the respiratory zone, which is primarily a gas exchange zone, the alveoli are surrounded by a network of capillaries which are present there for optimal gas exchange and diffusion of carbon dioxide into the lungs and the exchange of CO2 with oxygen into the blood. So if we talk about the parts, this is very high yield. That is, what are the three functions of the conducting zone? This is filters, warms and moistens air. Okay, and it humidifies the air. So this is something which comes in BCQs. Okay, now let's talk about the parts. So the parts of the conducting zone are all of the parts of the upper respiratory tract, that is the nasal cavity, mouth, pharynx, which is the throat, larynx, the voice box, the trachea. Then the trachea bifurcates into two parts, into the bronchi, the left and the right bronchi, which which further divide into the bronchioles and then the terminal bronchioles. And here in the respiratory zone, there are three parts, which is the respiratory bronchioles, the alveolar ducts and the alveoli, as we can see over here. So if we talk about the respiratory tree right now, the respiratory tree is conducting zone. We know that the trachea and the bronchi, they are the first line of defense against any pathogens we might inhale. Okay, they are the first line of defense. So let's move on now to our FA. So here I have some annotation done. First of all, the most important conversation to have is that the lung, it has a dual blood supply, as it is written over here. That is, it is an example of dual blood supply, which is like the deoxygenated blood comes from the pulmonary arteries and the oxygenated blood from the bronchial arteries. Another example of dual blood supply is the liver, जिसके अंदर hepatic artery and there's a portal vein. So I talked to you about this, कि trachea and bronchi are the first line of defense against any pathogens we might inhale. Then we talked about what are the parts of the conducting zone. Then there is this BCQ related high yield point, which is which part of the respiratory tree has the least resistance, least airway resistance, which is our it is our terminal bronchiole. तो उसके बाद, because they are like larger in number, so like the air resistance reduces, क्योंकि बहुत सारे होते हैं, so there's a lot of places for the air to go, तो relatively resistance reduce हो जाती है. फिर again we talked about the three functions of the conducting zone, but it does not participate in gas exchange. This is a very important point. And that is why it is called the anatomical dead space. There is also a physiological dead space, which we'll talk about later. Acha, the cartilage. Acha, here you can see this. This is like a whole uh, diagram showing the histological features of the respiratory tree. In this, you can see in the conducting zone, you can see from the trachea there are goblet cells, there are basal cells, there are ciliated cells, there is pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium, which extends only from the trachea to the bronchi. ठीक है, जैसे जैसे it goes down, the pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium starts becoming simple ciliated columnar, because at the end it's gonna turn into simple squamous. ठीक है, it's gonna turn into a squamous epithelium, which is like the best possible epithelium for easy diffusion, because it's very flat line na. The squamous epithelium, it's very squished and it's very flat. So here you can see there is a cartilage which keeps the airway strong, that gives like a physical support to them. It maintains their shape, while the goblet cells, they secrete mucus which traps any harmful substances. As you go down, you can see there is like there's a loss of goblet cells, there's a loss of basal cells, but ciliated cells are still present at level of bronchioles. As you go down, smooth muscle cell, it stays till the respiratory bronchioles, and the cilia, it stays till the terminal bronchioles. Okay, so and there's this club cell which is called the Clara cell, which we'll talk about later, inshallah. So then we have these, we have alveolar sacs, and then we have our alveoli, जिसके अंदर there are two types of cells, type 1 pneumocyte, type 2 pneumocyte. There's alveolar macrophage, which is a phagocyte. For example, in foreign particle, it goes inhaled and it can't be removed by our trachea or like our cuff reflex or anything. Then these alveolar macrophages, they initiate inflammation to get rid of them. ठीक है, so उसके बाद क्या कहते हैं, here you can see the alveolar macrophages clear the debris and participate in the immune response. और ये बात again we talked about it, the cilia terminate in the respiratory bronchiole. ठीक है, cilia terminate here, and the smooth muscle also is very sparse over here. Okay, तो उसके बाद वो कहता है कि मोस्ट क्यूबॉइडल सेल्स इन द रेस्पिरेटरी, मतलब क्यूबॉइडल सेल्स दे गो अप टू द रेस्पिरेटरी ब्रोंक्यूल, एंड सिंपल स्क्वामस सेल form from the alveoli. Yani there are two things, the cilia and the cuboidal cells, both they end at the level of the respiratory bronchioles. After that उसके बाद there is just simple squamous cell, ठीक है, and no cilia. So let's see this, and there's this BCQ. Airway smooth muscle cells extend up to the terminal bronchioles. उसके बाद there are very sparse. यहाँ पे you can see they are very sparse. They are there in the respiratory bronchiole, but they are very sparse. So the this is very important, and this is very important to remember. Okay, and thank you very much. Let's talk about the next topic in the other video.